Here are all of the superstar X Factors in NHL 23. Starting off with the Anaheim Ducks, they got the only X Factor player on their team is Trevor Zegras, who has the skilled up, which is basically elite lacrosse moves, puck on a string, it's tricky, and tape to tape. John Gibson has some superstar abilities. Troy Terry as well. Troy Terry, puck on a string, snipe, and all alone for John Gibson. We got dialed in. Butterfly effect, handled it, and contortionist. Next up, the Arizona Coyotes. They only have one superstar, who is Clayton Keller, which makes sense. Puck on a string, tape to tape. Moving on to the Boston Bruins. They got a bunch here. They have a bunch. They have 3 X Factor players who will be Brad Marchand, Charlie McAvoy, and David Pastrnak. I think that all makes sense. And then as superstars, they have Bergeron, and Swayman gets the superstar ability this year. So Pastrnak, McAvoy, and Marchand really going to be leading that team. Moving on to the Buffalo Sabres, they have 2 players that have superstar, no X Factor players. So Rasmus Dahlin and Tage Thompson, both going to be superstar players. The Calgary Flames have 3 superstar X Factors and 2 superstars. For the X Factors, Jonathan Huberdeau, who was acquired in a trade last year, Nazem the Dream Kadri, who they picked up in free agency, and Jacob Markstrom. Their superstar players are Elias Lindholm and Mackenzie Weegers, who they also picked up. Actually, I believe they traded for. They traded for Weegar. Carolina Hurricanes have 2 X Factor, 2 superstars. Their X Factors are Sebastian Aho, which makes sense. He's an absolute unit. And Jacob Slavin, Freddie Anderson, and Andrei Sveshnikov are their superstar players. And Sveshnikov has that skilled up, great lacrosse move, X Factor there. The Chicago Blackhawks have 1 superstar X Factor, which is Patrick Kane. Makes sense. Only, what's his overall? I thought I was going to say 88, but that's his jersey number. And then Seth Jones, who is just a regular superstar player. The Colorado Avalanche, I imagine they got a couple here. 5 total. So 3 X Factor players. Nathan McKinnon, Cal McCarr, and Mikko Rantanen. I mean, arguably the best player in the NHL. Arguably the best player in the NHL. And one of the top 10 players in the NHL at worst. Then they got Landeskog and Devon Toews as superstars. The Columbus Blue Jackets acquired an X Factor, and that was Johnny Gadreau. I guess you could say acquired. They didn't pay anything besides salary. It wasn't a trade. He was a free agent and decided to move on to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Patrick Laine, Jakub Voracek, and Zach Rowinski are their superstar players. The Dallas Stars, Joe Pavelski, the ageless wonder. Look at the picture on him. What a stud. Kind of looks like Phil Kessel in that photo. But he's an X Factor with Jason Robertson, who really had a breakout year last year. Their superstars are Miro Heiskanen, Roope Hintz, and Jake Ottinger, if I can speak. And I probably pronounced that incorrectly. But I remember he had 68 saves against Calgary. It was Calgary. In round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs last year, and they lost in overtime. Poor guy. Detroit Red Wings, 2 superstar X Factors, Dylan Larkin, and the stud Mo Sider. Tyler Bertuzzi and Lucas Raymond are their superstars. The Edmonton Oilers have the 2 best players, arguably, in the NHL. Definitely one of the best players in the NHL, with Connor McDavid as an X Factor. Leon Draisaitl also an X Factor. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Darnell Nurse are going to be their superstar players. Moving on to the Florida Panthers, Alexander Barkov, without question, one of their X Factors. And then their other X Factor is one of the players that they made a trade for, and that is Matt Tkachuk. Aaron Ekblad and Sam Reinhart are their superstar players. The LA Kings don't have any X Factors, but they have a boatload of superstar players, starting with Philip Deneau, Drew Doughty, Kevin Fiala, who they acquired, Adrian Kempe, and then Anze Kopitar, who's no longer a superstar X Factor. The Minnesota Wild have Kapril the Thrill Kaprizov as their X Factor. Superstars are Jared Spurgeon, the captain, and Mats Zuccarello, who actually had a really good quiet last year. The Montreal Canadiens have 1 X Factor, and that is going to be Cole Caulfield. Slafkovsky and Nick Suzuki are their superstars. Slafkovsky potentially going to be a superstar X Factor in the future, but for now, even Suzuki you could probably have there eventually, just not this year. Caulfield I wouldn't give it to them either, but they got to have one, right? The Nashville Predators, 3 X Factors and 2 superstars. So for the X Factors, they got Philip Forsberg, Roman Josi, who's probably the second best defenseman in the NHL, him or Hedman. You got to put McCarr number 1, and then Juice Saros, who kind of came out of nowhere under Pekka Rinne, so I'm not even surprised that he's as good as he is. Matt Duchene and Ryan McDonough are their superstars. Matt Duchene actually had a really, really good last year. I believe he was over a point per game, so it's always good to see him kind of bounce back after a couple tough years in the Ottawa Senators franchise. The New Jersey Devils have 2 superstars, and honestly, I wouldn't be so opposed to having Jesper Bratt an X Factor, but Bratt and Jack Hughes are their superstar players. The New York Islanders have 2 X Factors. Adam Pelech. His hairline, don't let him deceive you. He's only like 24. And Matt Barzal, who of course is an X Factor. Romanov gets up to a superstar player in this game with the hitting traits, as all the Montreal Canadiens fans know. He loves to throw his weight around. And then Sorokin, also superstar ability with the goaltender. The New York Rangers, okay, they have a fair bit of X Factor players on this squad, and it's well deserved. Adam Fox, who just lights it up on the back end. He's an X Factor. Artemi Panarin. Igor Shesterkin after almost a record year. Mika Zibanejad. R.I.P. We miss you in the Ottawa Senators. And then their 50-goal scorer, Chris Kreider, is their superstar player. The Ottawa Senators, a lot of superstars, 1 X Factor, and that X Factor is their acquisition in the offseason, which was Alexander DeBrincat. Their superstar abilities, we got Drake Batherson, Thomas Chabot, who I'm kind of surprised is in an X Factor, but that's okay. Claude Giroux and Brady Tkachuk to round it out. So no Tim Stützle on superstar abilities, which again, surprising, but that's okay. Philadelphia, 2 superstar players here. We got Sean Couturier and Travis Konechny. Do they have anyone else? Ryan Ellis you could probably put as a superstar when he's healthy. The Pittsburgh Penguins, Sid the Kid and Jake Gensel. Gensel's a really underrated player. He just scores. That's all he does. He just scores over and over again. Crosby will be a superstar X Factor for his entire life because he's an absolute beauty. Tristan Jerry is their first superstar. Chris Letang and Evgeny Malkin rounds out that squad there. The San Jose Sharks, 2 superstar players who I kind of really anticipated. Timo Meier and Thomas Hertel. No Erik Karlsson. They did get rid of Brent Burns, so he wouldn't be in here, but interesting. Pay $12.5 million or whatever it is, and he's not even a superstar. The Seattle Kraken have 3 superstar players, and Yanni Gourde, Jarrett McCann, and Shane Wright. So Jarrett McCann getting a little bit of an upgrade with Yanni Gourde. Love to see that. The St. Louis Blues have 2 X Factors on their squad. Ryan O'Reilly, one of the best two-way forwards the NHL has ever seen, and just a phenomenal captain, paired with Vladimir Tarasenko, who's an elite sniper in the NHL. These guys have 6, so this is the most, I believe, X Factor players on a team. Robert Thomas, Colton Parenko, Jordan Kyrou, and Pavel Buchnevich. Robert Thompson and Kyrou both had big breakout seasons, even Buchnevich last year, so that all makes sense to me. The Tampa Bay Lightning, these guys are going to have a lot, right? Okay, they got 5, but 4 of them are X Factors, starting with one of the best defensemen in the league, Mr. Victor Hedman, Nikita Kucherov, the man who throws fits at the end of games, Steven Stamkos, who had a 100-plus point campaign. Did you know that? That was a shocker to a lot of people. And then the best goalie in the NHL over the past couple of years, Andrei Vasilevsky, and then their superstar player, Braden Point, who's no slouch himself. The Toronto Maple Leafs always rated high in this game. Mitch Marner, superstar X Factor. I agree with this. I think Marner is a phenomenal player. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. Even playing in Toronto, it's always Austin Matthews, but Mitch Marner does so much for this squad, so I like to see that. Austin Matthews, of course, one of the best goal scorers in the NHL. You got to have him as an X Factor. All of his stuff, he's got tape to tape. I would put everything in shooting for him. Willie Nylander will be their first superstar. Morgan Riley and then Captain John Tavares rounds out their superstars. The Vancouver Canucks, JT Miller. I was thinking they were going to have him as a superstar, and it makes me super happy that he is an X Factor. He is unreal. JT Miller, go look at his stats if you haven't. The guy's just a workhorse. Assistant captain of the squad. I don't know what more to say other than he's a beast. Bo Horvath, the captain of the team superstar player with Quinn Hughes and Elias Peterson. Mr. Peterson had a couple injuries over the past couple of years, so hopefully he can get back to it. The Vegas Golden Knights, Mark Stone and Shea Theodore leading the way as X Factors here. Captain Mark Stone. Miss you in Ottawa, buddy. Shea Theodore, a really good defenseman. And then Jack Eichel and Alex Pietrangelo as their superstars. 2 years ago, these guys were probably X Factors. So crazy that they've digressed that much. But they're still both very good. And then the final two teams, we got the Washington Capitals. John Carlson, the most underrated defenseman in the entire NHL. Should have won at least 2 Norrises by now, but still has 0 somehow, some way. No clue how that happens, but John Carlson, X Factor, and Alexander Ovechkin, the greatest goal scorer the NHL has ever seen, superstar X Factor. Nicholas Backstrom, Evgeny Kuznetsov, and TJ Oshie, also known as TJ Oshie, will round out their superstar players there. And then the final team here, the Winnipeg Jets, Mr. Kyle Connor. He looks so different in his image on the left and right. On the right, he looks very, very interesting. But Kyle Connor, their only superstar X Factor. Makes sense. He is 40 goals a year given. Nikolai Ehlers, Connor Hellebuck, and Mark Scheifele are their superstar players. So that is all of the superstar X Factor and just superstar players in NHL 23. Let me know if anyone was missed, if someone should be an X Factor, if someone shouldn't be an X Factor, and if someone should be a superstar and should be a superstar. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Have a marvelous day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.